Good evening. The mayor is unable to attend tonight's city council meeting due to a scheduling conflict. As such, we will need to elect a presiding officer pro tem to facilitate tonight's city council meeting. I will now open the floor to accept nominations for a city councilor to serve as presiding officer pro tem for this evening. Are there any nominations?
If I may, I would like to nominate Councilor Ray.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to nominate Councilor Ray. Are there any other nominations for presiding officer pro tem? Seeing none, nominations are now closed. All those in favor of electing Councilor Ray to serve as the presiding officer pro tem for this evening's meeting, please indicate by a show of hands. All opposed? The motion carries with a vote of 6-0. Councilor Ray has now been selected to serve as the presiding officer pro tem for this council meeting.
Working on it. What do I do with this?
Yeah, you can just put it on the desk. Yeah. Very good. Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So we are here for a workshop tonight. First, we will receive an update from Museum LA from Rachel.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to bring you an update on a lot of things that have been happening in the past few weeks and the past year. We definitely have been evolving and have come a long way. We make every penny count because we have to. In the past couple of years, we've been recognized nationally now as one of 30 in America chosen to participate in the Becoming American Film Festival, which involved over 21 organizational partnerships in the community. We were chosen as only one of 20 in America to become leaders in the emerging movement to bring the arts and creativity to active older adults age 50 and above, called creative aging. We just finished our first poetry workshop, 8 weeks long, and we had 12 students allowed in the tip. And I was surprised that it filled up really quick. And it was really neat to see how they responded and had their evening of giving poetry back to the community. Visitors have now rated us number 1 of 21 things to do in Lewiston. We started at number 8. We opened a major new exhibit to a full house called Shoes from Function to Fashion. And comments heard as on the opening night was, we could go to New York and not see any better. And I agree. We have in the past few months worked with over 25 group and field trips from 3rd grade school to college levels, and that's the schedule that you have in your packet and that you can see. This year, it just completely blew wide open. The past 5 years of our trying to let people know that we are able to do these things, and I hope you noticed where from the whole state of Maine people are coming. Colby College now has reached out to us, and their students are starting to come, and they've also asked if we would open up internships to their students also. We have worked in the past few months with 4 Bates interns that have done major projects, and we received our first Quebec intern this year, and she's the one who helped us put together the Franco Trail LA. Our first book is getting ready to be published. It's in the editing mode right now, and it'll be about the designs of the Bates Mill workers. It should be out late this summer, so I hope you'll watch for it. It'll be really an amazing book. We now hold 3 and maybe even 4 National Treasures collections. When we first started, I thought we had 1, and we're up to 4, so I'm really thrilled. For example, we have 500 original hand-drawn millworker art and 4,000 graphic work designs that all the other places have been destroyed. We have 210 silk screens the size of bedspreads. We're the only ones left in America that have any. The others in all the other mills have been destroyed. When I first started, we had 10 original Bates bedspreads. We are now up to 250 original Bates bedspreads. So much so that we did an exhibit with the Bates bedspreads, and it was amazing to see the variety, and people were thrilled to see that there was so much. We now have 286 oral histories and doing more. We are starting, now that we've done textile, shoes, and brick, which is what we kind of started with, we are now starting to do oral histories of our local companies. We have local companies here that are global. They are doing amazing things. They are inventing things that, and we go by them every day and nobody knows that it's even happening. So we're going to start showcasing our local businesses and getting the oral histories put together. I have to say the museum went through hard times during 2 major economic downturns. We did face many challenges where we had to put our dream and vision of a future new museum on hold. However, Museum LA continued to persevere where many probably would have given up. Through it all, with good governance, decision-making, and sacrifice, the museum always and still remains debt-free, and we're really proud of that. We never faulted on a single bill. The question is, why do we need a new museum, and why now? First, we have no choice. We're in a temporary space, and our existing space is getting leased out at a fast pace. Now, that's beautiful for the community. The 2 top floors above us right now are being renovated, and we're living in the midst of that. And so they're bringing in 150 new people. Hooray. Boo-hoo for us, because it means that we're getting squeezed out. Second, we're losing important artifacts. Our storage areas are becoming smaller and conditions are really not appropriate. We have many items still in Mill 5, and definitely the conditions there are not helping. We're losing pieces that I wish we hadn't. 3, we cannot offer special new programs because of the lead paint and oils, so we can't bring children in certain areas and so forth. 4, we have inadequate space, it's like we're trying to put square pegs into round holes, and it doesn't work too good. And 5th, more important, we can't develop new income streams because our hands are tied. We don't own the building. There's a lot of things that we did, different programs and events that we'd like to do, and we can't because we just don't have the permission. So where are we now in the process towards the new museum? We have just completed and approved a 5-year master plan giving us future focus. We also adjusted, as seen here, the focus of what mostly we were going to be doing. When we first started, if you look on the left-hand side, there's 3 ways that you can build a museum. 1, curatorial, which is because it's mostly about the things and the artifacts and the archives and research. 2nd is build a museum for a community. And the 3rd is build a museum kind of like a destination, and like the Sports Hall of Fame or things like that. So very, very specific. When we first started, if you look at the red star, that is where we thought we were supposed to be. And we were. The most important thing about us was that the things that we were trying to save. And gradually, we became more community-oriented because we listened to the community and what they wanted. And now, if you look on the right-hand side, the star has moved away from curatorial, and it doesn't mean that we're not taking care of things and items and so forth, artifacts. But we are much more community, and we are becoming more and more a destination. Everybody said, you will never be able to be a destination point, Rachel. Well, we have now received people from 44 states and 12 countries. And we're working towards doing even more now. We've worked with the exhibit planners and designers to develop our exhibit concepts. And one of the things, the interpretive plan has to be developed for a museum, and this is what you're looking at here. This is the concept of what we are planning on being for the future. We are a museum of work and community, so you see where the work and community bubbles show the impact of what is happening. You can't leave out the river and canal system as part of telling the story, because that is where it all started with the Industrial Revolution, because we had the river and the water power. Everything that we do is we try, all the exhibits and the work that we do, we don't stay as just focused on LA. We take national history and put it in, and how do we in LA fit with the regional, the national as well as the global picture. One of the things that we have found that has become very, very important is the story of immigration. We did an immigration exhibit in 2010, and it was amazing because when we started doing the timeline, they wanted to do one of just the new immigrants, and I said, I think you need to do then and now, because we're all immigrants and we all come from someplace, and we did that. And the important thing that we found was that we had immigrants, and by the way, the Irish were here first, not the French Canadians. Sorry about that, I'm French Canadian, but there were a few French Canadian families that came in first, and but they did a little bit of farming. The Irish was actually the first wave of immigrants that came in because of the potato famine. And then the next wave of immigrants were the French Canadians. And then we had the Jewish, the Lithuanians, and it just kept going. But from 1960 to the year 2000, there was a big hole. So we did leave a big hole in the timeline to show that we really didn't have any major waves then. And so we had kind of gotten used to living with each other and so forth. So now we have to start telling the story from 2010 and what happened from there. The other thing that's very important is the people's stories. When we first started doing the exhibits, we were showing the equipment, and we just felt something was missing. It was the stories of the people who actually did the work. And that's when we started the oral histories. And so people's stories and innovation. If you read through all the 300 oral histories that we've done, many of our people probably didn't have a lot of education like we do have today. However, they were so creative and inventive, it was amazing to see what they did. So that's why we are using everything that we do from past to future we're going to include the theme of innovation, because Lewiston is known for it. We now have hired our architectural team, a local firm, Platts Associates. They'll be working with Experienced Design, who are our museum and exhibit planners. So we feel that we have a really good team that's going to give us a state-of-the-art future museum. We have a 2.5-acre completely green site on the riverfront near Simard Payne Park, as you know. That's the future new museum. That is owned free and clear, so we're ready to roll on that one. And the beauty of that is that it's right on the river and near the pedestrian bridge, so Bonnie Park is across the river, so it's going to be easier for us to be working with both cities so that whatever we do there gets connected, not only with the island plan that the City of Lewiston has, but what Lewiston Auburn is planning also. Yes.
I just wanted to keep that slide up. Also, you've got the Continental Mill to the south, which has just changed hands, and there's
Yes.
some exciting development plans down the road. And the Palco Mill, the old
Pamco
Yeah,
building,
Lewiston Mill, it was in the
Right.
historic district, is right on
right
the other
in
side
front
of
of
you.
us, right.
So, and of course, the new bridge went in.
Thank you for the bridge, by the way,
Yeah.
because it was a godsend last Sunday, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before.
But we have a dedication, I'm not quite sure what date, it's in July.
I'm waiting to hear, I'll be there.
Okay, great.
Definitely, and we have been talking with the people who own the building at Pamco, because we want to try to make sure that that works well. And the papers haven't finally been signed yet on the Continental Mill, so I'm giving them a chance to sign the papers, and then I'll give them probably a week or two to settle in. And then I'm planning on contacting them so we can talk about how we can do the whole, work together to make that something really beautiful. Thank you. We revamped and we've strengthened the board right now with new members and skills, and we've also added new staff with needed new skills that we felt we needed for the future. Both the cities of Lewiston and Auburn have worked with us and for receiving some funding to help towards the architectural engineering and design fees, and thank you very much for that. It's hugely appreciated. On the site that you see there, we've now invested $1.5 million, which includes the purchase of the property, the cleanup, the demolition, the stabilization, and we've spent $6 million of our operating budget, and that was all spent in the local economy. We've received visitors from 44 states and 12 countries. Tourism is alive and well in LA, and I hope that you're going to start thinking as a city about how do we get Lewiston, Auburn prepared for receiving tourism. We had the Franco Trail that we did a test run. I wanted to do a test run. The walking trail is fine, people can walk easily, but what happens when you have these big tour buses, and we now have put an ad in the papers, in the main tourism bus tour operators for Museum LA to start bringing in official bus tours here. But we have to make sure that there are places that you can turn the corners with the streets aren't wide enough and so forth. The test run, we used a trolley, which was kind of fun because as the trolley was going through the city, doors were opening, people were rushing out, they were waving, taking pictures, so they couldn't believe that tourists were actually going through the city, but we did. And so I think we have to look at the infrastructure of the city to start thinking about tourism itself, because that's going to be huge in the future. We also now have people from Portland, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts who call us and ask if they can become involved with us, either in committees or projects. And they actually come up for our committee meetings, and I'm going, whoa, and it's a huge help to us. We are presently one of the major leaders on the Museum in the Streets that we are working on for both sides of the river, for the riverfront. In 2017, we received a $1 million anonymous gift towards the new building, and this provided us the impetus needed to once again go back and say, we need to be bold, audacious, and daring. When we hit the downturns, we had to kind of back off and not be as bold, but we're back. So this is definitely not a project for the faint-hearted. We have preliminary cost figures from our master plan to show that we can go towards our new museum in 2 phases if need be. I would like to go full force, but Councilor Ray is laughing.
We know you in no other way.
We might as well. I mean, it's needed. We have to move out of where we are, and we have no choice. So phase 1 shows moving to the amount of space we presently have approximately, and that's 23,000 square feet at a building cost of $8,950,000. And believe me, as museum building goes, this is very frugal. We are using the frugality of the way our ancestors did, and we're making every penny count. What is really needed, however, like I mentioned, is the full thing, which is phase 1 and 2, which would add another 10,000 square feet for a total project investment of 33,000 square feet for $12,630,000. These figures include renovation costs, new construction, site work like parking, utilities, and landscaping. It includes permanent, temporary exhibits and galleries, architecture and engineering fees, furniture and equipment, initial startup costs, campaign costs, and a normal contingency building cost. It's of utmost importance for us to become sustainable as an organization. We've included a beginning $2 million endowment we're going to go for, to be grown to eventually $5 million, which would be contributions that we would keep in perpetuity and only use the interest income to help sustain Museum LA. Our 5-year operating budget is being able to be balanced, the budget, and move forward. This year, we did a projection according to all the earned revenue and everything else that goes with it, the endowments, and it shows that in 2021, which is approximately when we would be opening, to the next 5 years, we would be in the black, at least be able to balance our budget. What we've done is, actually, when we looked at all the different spaces that we needed to put together, I made sure that I put a little red I in front of the items, the spaces that would allow us to earn income, because those are the spaces that we need to really work on to get started, so that we make sure that we do become sustainable. So now we've gone beyond our original borders of textiles, shoes, and brick to incorporate other stories needing to be told. We have stories that are meant to be heard, experienced, and shared, which is what we are doing. Every day I see this affecting our elders, our businesses, our children, and our community. We just had an amazing experience. I asked the architects, the first thing I wanted them to do is listen to the community. So last Friday, we went to Auburn Middle School, then we came to Lewiston Middle School, and we listened to the students, and we asked them what they would like to see in the future new museum. And you know what? They were amazing. They weren't shy about telling us what they wanted. And then last night, we had a session at Baxter Brew for the young professionals and young families, and we listened to what they wanted about it. And that, too, was pretty amazing. So we've got all those notes. And Thursday night, everybody's invited. We're having a community forum at the atrium at the Bates Mill to have anybody in the community, everybody's invited to come and tell us what are your hopes and dreams for this future museum, because it's going to be theirs. So as you can see, we have a big job ahead of us. We are doing it for the future of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Definitely not for us, not for me anyway. I'm moving up there, as you can see. But this is legacy, and it's ours to leave for the future. I'd like to, anybody have any questions on this phase of it?
Could you repeat the date of the planning forum at the atrium?
It's Thursday night, this Thursday, and it's at 5:30 to 7.
Thank you.
The architects are going to be there with us, and it's going to be very interesting. If not, I'd like to just give you a little update on the fire that we had, because I'm waiting. Definitely, it was a devastating thing for us, just watching it and wondering whether it's going to go up in smokes. But luckily, it was not as bad as it could have been. When I went in and saw that they had started a fire that scorched a wall right near all the old floorboards that we saved from the 2 buildings that we took down, if they had touched those, that could have just gone up. There seems to be more structural damage than we thought. The structural engineers are coming tomorrow to evaluate it. I went down the basement, but I didn't dare go to the next corner, which is where the firemen had to actually bring down most of the ceiling in a quarter of the section of the building. So we're not quite sure what that's going to do for the next phase. So, but the artifacts that were damaged and strewn all over the place, some of it we've lost, but a lot of it I'm hoping that we'll be able to at least save them and have them taken care of. But at least we have a lot of smoke damage on those. But I'm trying to get all the costs put together now to see exactly what it's going to cost us to take care of it. So, just a quick note, the Franco Trail LA, we had 2 Quebec delegates that were here that actually took the test run bus tour with us, and they were so blown away with what they saw and heard and all the work that had been done by the various organizations. We were 6 organizations that worked together to do it. That they've now, I'm going up in August in New Moncton, New Brunswick, and they want us to present, use Lewiston as an example of what can be done in tourism when a community gets together to work together. So it's pretty neat that we're going to be represented at that session. So we should be proud of the people you have in Lewiston. Thank you. Any questions?
No? Thank you so much for this. That was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And now we will hear a workshop on Garcelon Cemetery.
I'll start off by giving a little bit of introduction, and I'll introduce David Garcelon, who's here from the Cemetery Association. Just a little background. Back in 2014, Mr. Garcelon did come to the council and request a donation from the city to assist in offsetting the cost of maintaining the cemetery. Since the association was running low on funds and their members were aging and it was getting more difficult to find volunteers to perform maintenance activities. At that time, he pointed out to us that the city actually owns a portion of the cemetery. There are 3 lots in the cemetery. One of them we clearly own, and there's a deed to the city to that effect. Mr. Garcelon is of the opinion that the city probably owns the other 2. We can't find any deed that specifically says that. So we're not sure whether we own any more than that one lot, which is slightly less than half of the cemetery. In your packet, there's some other background information. There's a letter from Mr. Garcelon requesting that the city take over maintenance of the cemetery. There's a map of the cemetery that shows the 3 lots. There's a treasurer's report that shows the finances of the Cemetery Association, a chronology and history of the cemetery, the deed transferring Lot 15 to the city, that's the one that we own, and that we know we own, and a legal opinion from the city solicitor regarding the city's obligation to maintain the cemetery. In case you don't know where this is, the cemetery is located near the intersection of Ferry and Cotton Roads. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Garcelon to make a presentation.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to start by coming up here to this little, sorry, I
Do we
don't
have
have
the
PowerPoint.
wireless mic? Just because it's televised, Mr. Garcelon, we're going to look for the wireless mic for you while you're standing. He's coming.
Talk pretty loud, so I don't. And I haven't used one of these. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for asking me to come to the workshop. I appreciate it very much. I am David Garcelon. I'm a descendant of the Garcelons, who the cemetery was named after. I'm also the president of the Garcelon Cemetery Association. Way back in the 1770s, when Lewiston was being settled, there were very few people here. James and Deliverance Garcelon and 6 of their children came to Lewiston Falls area, up here in the center of town, in 1776. And their 7th child, Sally, was born 1 week after the Declaration of Independence here in Lewiston. James and Deliverance moved down to South Lewiston at the end of Ferry Road, where it did cross the Androscoggin River in 1778. And a few other people moved down there, and South Lewiston became its own little village, or little neighborhood. People were dying, and so they made the Intervale Cemetery, which was a small cemetery right on the banks of the Androscoggin River, and was on land owned by James Garcelon. In 1814, in May of 1814, the river flooded and pretty much wiped out the Intervale Cemetery. Several bodies are thought to have washed down the river, including my great-grandfather James, who was one of the first settlers. And then in 1819, in May of 1819, Hannah Ames Garcelon, who was the wife of Mark Garcelon, James's son, died. And she died on May 17th. And a mystery has been solved, I believe, by Thomas Hodgkin's diary. Thomas Hodgkin lived in this area at the time, and he wrote extensive diaries, almost 40 years of diaries. And in his diary, he tells about how he sat with Mrs. Garcelon as she was dying, and they expected her to have her last breath, and he started on the 15th of May, and he went through, when she died, he made a coffin for her, and then he put her corpse in a coffin. He tells all this in his diary. And on the 18th, the day that she was to be buried, he writes in his diary that the neighbors got together and begged and asked for Mark Garcelon to sell them a piece of land for the burying ground. Not the Garcelons, but the neighbors asked Mark Garcelon to sell them a half acre for burying ground. And he agreed. They paid him $10, and Hannah Ames Garcelon was buried. Now that piece was this piece right here, which is approximately half an acre. And then over a period for the next 52 years, this cemetery, everyone in the neighborhood, not just Garcelons, even though it's named after them, because all of this land was originally Garcelon land, but many of the neighbors were buried there. And by 1871, John Blethen Garcelon, who owned all of this land that went from here and all the way down to the river, except for this piece, which he recognized he didn't own, he deeded a piece which started here, ran around there, and deeded a piece for half acre, defined, and said very specifically that he was starting at the north angle of the existing cemetery. In 1905,
Mr. Garcelon, would you hold?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
In
Those
19,
following at home.
I'm not used to using one of these. I talk so loud. In 1905, many of the family members of people who had been buried in the Garcelon cemetery became discouraged with how the city of Lewiston was taking care of the cemetery, and so they formed in April of 1905 what they called the Garcelon Cemetery Association, and the wording was for the permanent care and maintenance of the cemetery. And they had members who paid dues and or made donations, and they used that money to care for the cemetery. And for a period of time, they were able to get the city to help them. And somewhere along the line, that stopped. No one knows why, but in 1971, Gerard Berby, the city councilor of the city of Lewiston, said, the city owns a cemetery, but the Garcelon Cemetery Association is taking care of it. And he specifically said it was made up of two parcels. One purchased before 1850, and then the 1871 parcel. Sometime after that, all of a sudden it stopped becoming one parcel. It started being drawn as two parcels with three parcels. No one knows why. I don't know why. I can conjecture. But now, this is shown as tax map lot 131-1. This is shown as 131-15. And this is shown as 131-14. But as of now, the Garcelon Cemetery Association has taken care of that cemetery for 114 years. And we have members of 93 years old. We don't have many members under 60. I'm 78. So we're running out of money. The city has helped us somewhat in that Steve Murch went down and cut a bunch of trees in the back. There was two big honey locust trees that he's helped to cut. But the money, the primary care and money spent on the cemetery has been by us. We can't continue. We can continue the association in the hope that if we get new members, we can go up and do things at the cemetery, just like a ladies' auxiliary might do for the church or something like that, where we would do our best to help keep the cemetery looking good. But we would like, to be very frank about it, for the city to admit they own the cemetery, number one, and to take care of it. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Garcelon? Councilor Rice.
Could you you summarize Marty's response on that issue?
Yes.
That would be helpful.
As you could tell if you've read that memo, the state law is not the clearest of all possible situations, but in very briefly, it's clear we own one lot. So clearly we have maintenance responsibility on that lot.
And what percentage of the whole cemetery?
It's half, roughly half.
Well, it's a little bit less than half, because there's an out parcel that was retained by the individual who deeded the lot over to the city, but that's a relatively small parcel. Then the question becomes, what can the city do versus what it has to do? We have an obligation to maintain the graves of veterans, and there's a map in the packet that shows veterans' graves. They are, near as I can tell, scattered throughout the cemetery, so that there would be some in each part of the cemetery. Although they also indicate that that can be done in conjunction with, among others, the cemetery association. So it could be a joint effort, or it could be something the city did on its own. In terms of the other parcels that we don't own, that we don't know that we own, and I think I don't know if there's a difference of opinion or just a difference if we don't have the data. Mr. Garcelon feels like we own both of those. We can find nothing that specifically deeded those parcels over to us. But we can maintain those because this is an ancient burying ground, which was started prior to 1880, whatever the date is in the state law. So we kind of have an obligation to maintain our own land. That kind of makes sense. We have an obligation to ensure that the veterans' graves are maintained. And that can be done in conjunction with the cemetery association. And we can maintain an entire cemetery, the entire cemetery, even the parts we may or may not own, if it's in effect abandoned and there's no one taking care of it, then it becomes the city's responsibility.
And could you quickly just summarize other cemeteries that the city has an interest in?
Kathy can probably do that better than I can.
Sure, so there's about 15 cemeteries that are located within the city. All of the cemeteries that the city owns are not active burial grounds. The reason being is that we've probably inherited those over time due to a similar situation that Mr. Garcelon is describing. With that responsibility, we probably inherited the records at one time, but today we don't have the records for those cemeteries, so we don't know exactly if folks are buried in a plot that is not a marked grave. So all of the cemeteries that the city owns are not active burial grounds. The larger cemeteries in the city, of course, are privately owned, Mount Hope, St. Peter's, Riverside, et cetera. But all the ones that the city owns, we maintain the grounds and the lawn, but that's the extent that we do.
And Garcelon is also not an active burial.
It's not a what?
Would it-
Oh, yes,
It is, it is. It's run by, that's considered a private cemetery, as Mr. Garcelon is describing. They do have plots that are sold and active burials, probably not frequent, but it is still an active burial ground with people who have purchased lots and could be buried there in years to come.
Thank you.
In Public Works, I did do an estimate. They're estimating that just taking care of the grass and some basic stuff would probably run in the range of $3,000 or $4,000 a year.
We're doing it for less. We're doing it for less, but it's been going up, and we beat on the heads of these people and try to make them think that they're helping the history of Lewiston, and so we get it done for about, right now, we're getting it done for about $2,000, but there's certain things that we aren't getting done. It's growing up in the back since Steve Mitch cut those trees down on the city's part. There's a lot of broken stones that have been broken. Bear in mind that some of the earliest settlers of Lewiston are buried there. I mean, there's the Hodgkins, the Dingleys, the Ames, the Garcelons. It's not entirely Garcelon. It's there are 93 Garcelons buried in that cemetery, but there's about 470 people total. Dingleys. I think there's 45 in the Dingley family. Very, very early settlers. It's a historic site. There's no question about it. And with Doug Hodgson's help, I don't know if any of you know Doug, but he's basically the city historian emeritus, if you want to call him that. He knows more about, Doug and I are 6 cousins. But in any event, Doug transcribed all of Thomas Hodgson's diaries. And some of them are still at the Androscoggin Historical Site, and some of them are in private hands, but he got the fellow that had the ones in private hands to give him, and he transcribed every one of them. And what I read to you was an actual transcription from that diary, which to me doesn't make anybody happy, but you aren't going to be able to show, I'll give you an example. James Garcelon moved on to that land in 1878. You know when he got his deed to it? 1806. He didn't get his deed for 28 years. The Penobscot proprietors didn't give him a deed for 28 years, not until 1806. So, and there's a lot of land down there that if you try to trace it back to the Penobscot proprietors, you're not going to find the deeds. It's understandable. It was a long ways up to Wiscasset because it was a Lincoln County registry of deeds at the time. These people agreed amongst themselves. Their word was their bond, and that's what happened. And Thomas Hodgson's record is the only record we have, but it is very clear. The record is, what he said is very clear. Let me just read it to you. I think I put it in those papers. The 15th, went over to Lieutenant Dingley's. I paid him $4.42. I went over to see Mr. Dyer. He was very feeble, although he kept about at night. I watched with Mr. Matt Garcelon's wife. We thought she was breathing her last many times in the night. The 16th was sad. I was at home. It was very rainy. The 17th was very rainy. I went down to see old Mrs. Brooks, who was very sick. In the PM, I was making a coffin for Mrs. Matt Garcelon's wife. The 18th, I carried the coffin to the house and put in the corpse. Neighbors met to agree on a new spot for a burying ground. They agreed to give Mr. Matt Garcelon $10 for a half-acre land in the southeast corner of his lot where the schoolhouse now stands. At night, I watched with the deceased. And that's the only record we have, but it's clear. There is no equivocation about it whatsoever. And back in those days, it was more usual than unusual not to record transactions. There are a lot of parcels of land in Lewiston that you cannot trace back to the Penobscot proprietors in the Registry of Deeds for the simple reason that people threw them in the bureau drawer, or threw them in the desk, or left them up in the kitchen cupboard, and that was it. They never got them recorded. I'm a land surveyor. I've retired. But when you get back into the early 1800s up in this area, it's not unusual to find what we call kitchen tabletop deeds that were retained by the parties that were involved in the transaction, but never recorded.
Councilor LaJoy?
First, I'd like to commend you on the history background you gave us. I thought it was extremely enjoyable reading.
Thank you.
As far as history goes, and I wish there was more of it because I enjoyed reading it. Secondly, if we did do something with we did take over the cemetery, would we bore the full cost of expense, or would the association share some of that expense with the city?
What the association, I'm speaking as the president, and I've had 2 meetings about this with the association. So I know the direction they want to go, and the direction they want to go is they want to be free to do things at the cemetery that help to improve it or at least maintain it. but they don't want to be bound to do it.
Okay.
They want to be able to elect to do it rather than to be bound to do it.
One of the issues that we have is that over the years, the city has acquired a lot of maintenance responsibilities, particularly for, over the years, the city has acquired a lot of maintenance responsibilities for, obviously, as Kathy mentioned, the cemeteries that we already have. Plus, as we have torn down properties and eventually taken those parcels for tax title, those are properties that we also have to pick up maintenance responsibilities on. So part of the problem is that Public Works is really stressed trying to keep up with all of these parcels, because a lot of them are relatively small and they're scattered, so they're relatively inefficient. So we certainly can take on maintenance responsibilities. It's going to be difficult for us to maintain it to any kind of level that perhaps the Cemetery Association would like to see us keep it at, or what they've been able to keep it at. My suggestion, if we ever did take over responsibilities, it would be that we contract out the mowing, so that we don't have to send crews all the way out there. That's a lot of downtime on a city crew, sending them out that far to do maintenance operations. Right at the moment, we don't have money budgeted for that, so that's a secondary issue going into next budget year. So I think it's going to basically be up to the council what you want to do. We obviously have some obligation out there. And I would think, you know, at a minimum, we might want to speak with Mr. Garcelon for this year about some kind of joint arrangement between the two, and then we can revisit this when we get into the budget for the following year to see if we can't find a way to provide the funds so that we can maintain the cemetery at a reasonable level.
Let me explain what we do now. We contract with a firm here in town called Garcelon and Landscape. He does a spring cleaning for $300, a fall cleanup for $300, and $160 per mowing. He was doing it for $125. So far, we've spent $620 this year. All right. We feel that's very reasonable. We have no problem with it. I couldn't mow that for $160, and I'm pretty good at mowing lawns. But last year it cost us $1,820 to do those two things: mow and trim, and do the cleanups in the spring and fall. And with the locust trees out there, they shed like crazy. Steve Murch's cut down 3 of those for us. He had the truck that he could do that with. And so we've gotten rid of that problem. The stumps are still there, and we got to dig the stumps up. I personally have dug some pretty big stumps up myself. But we're getting to the point where none of us are able to go up there and do any work. I live in Harpswell. It's a 55-mile round trip for me to go up there, and I'm getting to be an old man, so I don't. But that's what we're paying. That's what it's costing us now. This year, it'll probably be a little over $2,000.
I guess my question would be to the city manager, I guess. Would it be advisable to continue conversation with the association to see if some type of agreement could be brought forward by both of the association?
That would certainly be something that we could follow up on with Mr. Garcelon and his members.
There is a lot, and I agree with you, there's a lot of historical value there and everything, but you have to understand that we, with the citizen dollar, have to be quite careful. And something unexpected will say that was not planned on for this budget would not be available until the next budget. But finding some place in the middle where both parties could work together to attain that goal, I think would be advantageous to both parties.
Well, I'm interpreting what you said, Ed, but we certainly would have no problem with a deal in which you hire a contractor, you maybe even want to hire Carrier, I don't know, and say, do the mowing and the trimming and the spring and fall cleanups, which would be around $2,000, and that the Garcelon Cemetery Association would try their best to take care of other things. There is a fence that needs to be replaced or taken down. We took a vote on it last year because it was going to cost us $8,000 to replace it. We didn't have $8,000. So Steve Murch advised me that why not take it down? And I got the members to agree. We can just take it down and have it lawn up from the road right in. So it's things like that. So those are the kind of things the association would be happy to help with.
Any other counselors who have questions or comments? Counselor Marcotte?
I did have a question. When you were referring to the portion that was owned by the city, which portion is that, the road
The
front?
back,
The
back
one.
half. There's a basic, this half here, and then there's this lot out. There's a basic misunderstanding, I think. Cemeteries were the first condominium homeowners associations, where, let's call it the city of Lewiston owns the underlying land, but other people own the burying plots, just like in a homeowners association. Private parties own the condos, but the maintenance of the roads and the lawns and so on are taken care of by the homeowners association, okay? So if you want to look at it that way, David Garcelon owns a lot in the cemetery, but it's the city of Lewiston Cemetery. So yes, I have a plot, and this is what James Blevin Garcelon reserved to himself, was a burial plot in the city of Lewiston Cemetery. And yes, he did reserve it. And what's happened here, it's very interesting. If you go out there, you'll find a bunch of old gravestones right here. And one of them has an 1813 death date, which doesn't make any sense, except James Blevin Garcelon was so interested in trying to find old stones from the Intervale Cemetery that he reserved this plot and found them and moved them up here. All right? Because you get on there and the very oldest stones in the cemetery are slate stones on that parcel right there. And there's about 10 of them. And all we can conjecture is some of them were what they found from the remains of the Intervale Cemetery. But burying grounds were basically the first homeowner condominium association type of land ownership deal, where the underlying land is the homeowners association and the condos are the responsibility of the owner of the condo.
So the notation, September 18th, 1871, in your,
Right, it was September 1871 that second transaction happened.
so when you make the reference to the 104.28 feet wide by 225.06 feet long,
Right.
talking about the back parcel,
22506 by 10428.
and reserving a piece for himself, which is that small,
Right, 28 feet by 104.28.
because that's the part I couldn't understand whether it was the back parcel or the front parcel.
And he specifically said that it was for burial purposes only. I'm paraphrasing, but I've got the deed here, but
Yeah, the deed's in your packet, and it basically says, reserving a piece of the above-described land in the southwesterly corner, 28 feet wide,
it's rods and lakes.
yeah, around 28 feet wide, around the old burying ground, and 6 rods and 8 lengths in length, which shall be reserved to the said grantor for a burying ground, and for nothing else, and for no other purpose.
Right. In other words, he was saving himself a burial plot, just like all the other burial
It-
plots in the
I
cemetery.
think I would have to refer that to a legal opinion, but it seems to me that that parcel was not transferred to the city, was reserved as an out parcel. But I'd have to, I'm
Yeah,
admitting I'd have to have an attorney's opinion on
Right.
it.
If I were
Counselor Markey.
arguing it, I would say he was reserving it for a burial plot.
Counselor
Big
Marcotte, are you
burial
all
plot.
set?
Okay?
It's a big burial
I have a
plot.
comment.
Hey, folks, the counselor
It's a
has the floor.
very large burial plot.
That's right, but
Lost control.
he's not even buried in it. He's buried down at the front of the cemetery.
Mr. Garcelon, the counselor has the floor.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that I'd be willing to do something in a working relationship, more of a direction to the administrator. Something in the way of a contribution to the association. If the association isn't giving up control of the association and the ownership, or not necessarily the ownership, but the perpetual care of the cemetery, then it may be more wise for us to contribute monetarily than even creating programs within the city, because a lot of times an association can probably do things a lot less expensive than the city can.
Right. That was the original request in 2014. I don't believe that's the current request.
So that was a nonprofit request in 2014 that was denied because
Right.
we do not
In
do cash
2014, the
requests.
request was that we contribute toward the cost.
Okay.
And today, the request is that we take over full maintenance.
Yeah, I'm not interested in full maintenance, but
Well-
looking at the financials and how much is sitting there, and the fact that the history that's involved, which goes both ways. As I was reading through this, and I did a lot of family research recently in Bowdoin, and I've got some ancestors who were in the Civil War, and maybe even some in the Revolutionary War that are back in Dover, New Hampshire, but you've got my sentiment to a certain degree here.
I'm sorry?
You have my sentiment to a certain degree. Maybe not the request for today,
Yeah.
but the request that was done earlier, and if it can be
Yeah.
done in a different way, then I know that we don't do cash contributions. It's been a policy, but
Right. The problem with the association is the association lives and dies with its members. Okay? You have members and you have officers. Okay? And when those members or officers die, you no longer have an association. And then the money has to be given back to the heirs of the members. Okay? Not to the city, because it wasn't formed as a governmental agency. It wasn't formed as a political agency. It was formed as a private, nonprofit association for the care of the cemetery. All right? No ownership. I mean, it was 1819 to 1905. It was 86 years before the Garcelon Cemetery Association was formed. And so to say that that front half of the cemetery, which John Blevin Garcelon added another piece, okay, belonged to the Garcelon Family Cemetery Association is ignoring the facts. Ignoring the facts that when that piece was created, and up until 1871, it was always thought of as a Garcelon Cemetery, town of Lewiston. Okay? So that's...
I'm sure that legislative responsibilities were much different in those days.
I'm sorry?
Legislative responsibilities were probably different in those days, but...
Sure, the neighbors took care of it back then, but they considered themselves citizens of Lewiston. They went to Mark Garcelon. Mark Garcelon could have just said, I'm going to set aside this plot of land and bury my wife there. The neighbors came to him and said, sell us a half-acre of land, we'll give you $10 there for it. Okay, so we're willing to cooperate with the city, but we don't want a donation. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for help with the maintenance and care of the cemetery. Because what's happened is we're getting to the point where we don't have anybody that can do the work. Another 10 years, I'm going to be 88 years old. Gene Connor.
Excuse me, there should be no applause from the audience during a presentation. Thank you.
Gene Connor just turned 93. He's been a member for a long time, but he hasn't been to the cemetery for over 5 years because he can't. I mean, we used to go up there and have picnics while we raked the cemetery and mowed the grass and stuff. We'd all get together and have picnics and do that. Okay, so we're not looking for a donation. We're looking for some sort of commitment to help maintain it, and we're very willing to say, as long as we got money and members who are willing to vote on how to spend it, that we're willing to help. But we foresee the fact that pretty soon it's just going to die, and we don't want it to die. Okay? We don't want the Garcelon Cemetery Association to die because all its members have died. And so we can get to a point where we think the association's not going to continue, and we can vote to give the money to the city, but at this point, we'd like to keep doing some things here.
Councilor Marcotte, are you all set?
I'm wondering what the administrator's thoughts are at this point.
I think I would be happy to sit down with Mr. Garcelon and with our Public Works Director and have some discussion and see what we can come up with to come back to the council.
That would be great.
That's great.
I'm happy to do that.
I'm in support of that movement, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we do have responsibilities to
We
clear.
certainly do, there are certain responsibilities that he clearly does have, yes.
Great. With that, thank you, Mr. Garcelon. We will
Thank
take
you.
a very short break and start in 5 minutes. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. So welcome to Lewiston, the second largest city in Maine, but the city with the biggest heart. Yeah, thank you. So we have some mayoral recognition, and the mayor regrets that she could not be here tonight, but we'd still love to recognize all of you wonderful folks who are here today. So the first group is the Lewiston High School girls tennis team, who recently won Class A state championship, and it's their 13th state championship, so great job, guys. And just a couple of notes about this girls tennis team accomplishments. They had an undefeated season of 16-0. They were the 2019 KVAC champions, the 2019 Class A North champions, and then the 2019 Class A state champions. So an impressive group. I'm going to come around and read off your names and give you your certificates. Does someone want to help me with this? Thanks, Kathy. So we have head coach Anita Murphy, and it is her 41st year leading this program. And when you do come up, stay up here because we'll take a photo after as well. We have assistant coach Lorraine Bowen. We have Molly Chicoine, Anita's granddaughter. Congrats. Libby Forgos. Lauren Foster. Madeline Foster. Molly Gallagher, not able to attend, but still great. Sydney Hill, not here either. Alexandra, also not here. Okay, Renee, no. Oh, that's cool, great. Amelia Lewis, Brianna Melanson, Emma Paquette. Here we go. Julia Paquette. Jillian Pelletier. Kaylin Ritchie. No. Abby Svor. Julia Svor. And Rosalind Wayless. Back there. All good? Thanks, guys. Great job. And tonight we are recognizing and honoring 4 local organizations that annually coordinate the placement of flags at individual veterans' gravesites in Lewiston. The state passed a law in 2001 that requires municipalities to purchase and place American flags at the gravestone of every veteran buried in each cemetery located in that town. The flags must be in place for Memorial Day each year. As we recently heard, Lewiston has 15 cemeteries and places almost 7,000 flags annually. And all this work is done by community volunteers. For many of the smaller cemeteries, abutting neighbors usually place the flags for us each year, but for the larger cemeteries, there are 4 local organizations which have adopted these cemeteries over the years and take care of placing the flags for the city. There is no master list of veterans buried at the cemetery, So volunteers need to walk each row of stones and read the inscription on each gravesite. If military service is listed on the stone, a flag is placed there. There is a fairly time-consuming process, so these dedicated volunteers are greatly appreciated. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank you for your support of our city's deceased veterans, and we thank you for remembering their service to our country each and every year. And so certificates of appreciation are being presented to Knights of Columbus Council 106, Reverend Louis J. Fourier Chapter, for placing flags at Riverside Cemetery and Grand Army of the Republic Cemetery. There are approximately 1,600 flags for these locations. The Liberty Festival Board of Directors, which partnered this year for the first time with the staff of Albert and Burpee Funeral Home for placing flags at Mount Hope Cemetery and Clough Cemetery. There are approximately 1,200 flags for these locations. Marcus. Thank you. And if you'll stay up here. We'll do photos. And the LA Veterans Council for placing flags at St. Peter's Cemetery, and there are approximately 4,000 flags at that location. All right, we'll do our gathering again. We'll do it again. Great job, guys. Alrighty, and now for an update from the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council.
Good evening, City Council. This will be my last presentation to you as the chair of the 2018-2019 Lewiston Youth Advisory Council. Lewiston High School's graduation was June 7th, and I, along with LYAC members Christine Chassie, Zach Moore, and Hunter Landry, Hunter Steele, and Jordy Dushimi all graduated. On June 5th, we held our award ceremony here in the chambers for the winners of our anti-bullying elementary school poster contest and recognized 6 students representing Farwell and McMahon with the I'm a kind kid, I don't bully shirts. During that evening, we also launched our anti-bullying pledge cards, and LYAC members and poster winners signed them. The cards read, "Humankind equals kind humans, bully-proof Lewiston, Maine. I'm a kind kid, I don't bully. I pledge to be a kind person and not bully other people." On the morning of June 14th, LYAC member Hope Rubito shared her very own powerful story of being bullied in school and how it almost led to the end of her life. Her presentation was given to 2 classes at Lewiston Middle School, and she also recognized the teacher, Mrs. Good, who reached out to her in 8th grade and literally saved her life. All students in those 2 classes signed anti-bullying pledge cards. On the afternoon of June 14th, Councilor Zach Pettingill, our advisor Dottie, and I interviewed new applicants for the 2019-2020 LYAC year. We had great candidates, and it was tough to fill 19 open slots of the 13 applicants that we had. With 6 returning LYAC members, we will now be at our full capacity of 15. Dottie will be reaching out to those selected this week. They will be officially appointed at the July 16th City Council meeting, and Councilor Zach Pettingill has asked that the 6 of us who graduated recently also be recognized for our service at the meeting. During our recent interviews, we are very pleased to hear from many applicants about how much LYAC's anti-bullying sticky notes put on every locker in Lewiston High School in April had meant to students. Apparently, some of the notes are still up and students are still continuing to read them. I'd like to take a minute to thank Mayor Cloutier, who isn't here today, Councilor Pettingill, and the entire City Council for your support at LYAC. Also, Lewiston Firefighters Association for their continued sponsorship of LYAC. I have enjoyed my 3 years in the Youth Council and learned a lot about my hometown, and I've grown, especially in my past 2 years as chair. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing what the next Youth Council will be doing.
Thank you, Emma, for that. We're going to be moving into the meatier part of the agenda, so I want to give a minute or two, if folks are not sticking around for that, for them to head out And just once you get into the hall, if you could remain a little quiet so we can conduct business. Thank you. A lot of folks here. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. She's coming back in July. July. Zach's already on top of it.
Okay. Great. We'll move on to acceptance of the minutes.
Yes, so acceptance of the minutes of the May 21st and June 4th, 2019 meetings.
So move.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Lyson. Any discussion? I just want to say I sent an edit to Kathy earlier today, so that amendment.
It's a starting and ending time for an executive session.
Friendly amendment.
Friendly. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
and Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
All right, we'll open public comment period. Any member of the public may make comments regarding to issues pertaining to Lewiston City Government with a 3-minute per speaker time. And these must be comments not related to any items on tonight's agenda. If you're looking for tonight's agenda, it's by the front door. Does anyone wish to make a public comment at this time? Public comment period is closed, and we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Sure, and we'll just clarify for the record that all roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the counselor of Ward 6. And the consent agenda this evening consists of 3 items. Item number 1, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 19 Cram Avenue. Number 2, amendment to the traffic schedule to remove 1-hour parking on a portion of Ash Street. And number 3, amendment to the traffic schedule to create 3 15-minute parking spaces on Park Street.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor LaJoy, a second by Counselor Lyson. Discussion on the council? No, no discussion on this one. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward
Thank
6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for the Acme Social Club Incorporated, 255 Park Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to the Acme Social Club Incorporated, 255 Park Street.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Lyson, a second by Counselor Bean. Any questions from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
and Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing for approval of an outdoor entertainment permit for the Liberty Festival. Requested action to conduct a public hearing on an application from the Independence Day Committee for outdoor musical concerts to be held at Veterans Memorial Park and surrounding areas on July 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th as part of the Liberty Day Festival, and to authorize a permit for an outdoor entertainment event as required by the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Article 1, Section 10-3, to the Independence Day Committee for the outdoor music concerts contingent upon positive recommendations from the Police Department, Fire Department, Code Land Use Officer, and Code Health Officer regarding compliance with all regulations and compliance with all city ordinances.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor LaJoy, a second from Counselor Lyson. Any questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 6.
Item number 6, public hearing and final passage for land use code amendments regarding the creation of the Lewiston Commercial Historic District. Requested action that the proposed amendments to Appendix A, Article 15, Significant Buildings and Districts, Section 6, Designated Historic Structures and Historic Districts, subsection B2, Lewiston Commercial Historic District of the City Zoning and Land Use Code receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, a second by Counselor LaJoy. Questions from the council? Counselor Marcotte?
Just want to make sure the agenda said first passage.
It did? If it does, I apologize, that would be a typo. This is final passage because we
Final.
had first passage on May 21st.
Okay.
So I should say final.
Right there in the.
Any further questions from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, public hearing and first passage for land use code amendments regarding nursery schools. Requested action that the proposed amendment to Appendix A, Article 2 definitions and Article 11 district regulations of the city's zoning and land use code concerning changes to the definition and classification of nursery schools receive first passage by a roll call vote and to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled city council meeting for final passage.
So move.
Second?
I have a motion by Councilor LaJoy, a second by Councilor Pettingill. Could the Planning and Code Department give us a brief overview on this?
Thank you. Good evening. What you have before you is a text amendment. As you mentioned, it includes two parts. One is to create a definition for nursery schools, which currently is not present in our zoning ordinance. And the second part of the text amendment would be to change the land use designation for nursery schools. Right now, it is considered to be an academic institution, and the staff looked carefully at that, and I'll mention that we have the applicant, Michelle Roberts, is here, and she was looking to start a nursery school where she lives, and her zoning and her property is Neighborhood Conservation A. And so she was told that according to the zoning ordinance, she would not be able to do that. It's not a permitted use because it would be considered an academic institution. She came to the staff to discuss this to see if there was some other way to address nursery schools in our zoning ordinance. So we talked with Mrs. Roberts, and we agreed basically that the staff felt that it was more appropriate to align nursery schools more in with child care facilities, that would be a better fit. That nursery schools, as they're defined by the state, are a much closer fit to daycare, child care centers, things like that. So that's where we agreed with her that we thought this would be a good idea, plus the fact that nursery schools are not defined in our zoning ordinance, so we added that as part of this text amendment. We utilized the state definition of nursery schools and then also added 3 other conditions or criteria that would be part of the definition for nursery schools, especially in the NCA district, which is where she lives. And we felt it would be, under the right conditions, be appropriate for nursery schools, but it would have to be on property that was at least 1 acre in size, that it would be limited to no more than 20 children per sessions. And if you're not familiar, nursery schools run in like 2-hour or hour-and-a-half sessions in the morning and then in a session in the afternoon. And that the third condition would be that the nursery school would be accessory to a single-family home. The staff also looked at all the different types of uses where, for nursery schools that could be associated with other zones and matched up nursery schools similar to what is allowable for other child care facilities. So we felt that this is a good fit. We support this text amendment, and I can't think of too much else. We also did some other analysis of mapping just to make sure that we weren't opening too big a door for nursery schools. And out of the 6,047 parcels that are in the Neighborhood Conservation A district, there was 157 are 1 acre or greater, so we don't feel that there's a lot of opportunity to have nursery schools. We think nursery schools are a good thing as well. And also mention that that nursery schools in the Neighborhood Conservation A would be considered a conditional use. So any applicant who wanted to start a nursery school in the Neighborhood Conservation A would also have to go to another step to do a conditional use. And as you may know, the main focus of a conditional use is an applicant's compatibility with the surrounding property. So we make sure that neighbors would be involved in any applications for nursery schools in certain zones. So
Thank
I'd be
you.
glad to answer any questions, and we have the applicant, Michelle Roberts, is here as well.
Counselor Lyson?
Yes, Doug, the planning board has given this a favorable record. Were you at that meeting, or can you summarize what occurred? Or?
Correct, yes. At the planning board meeting, no one was present to oppose or support. There was no, at the public hearing. The planning board was supportive of this, the same way I think the staff was. It's the same reasons. They agreed that nursery schools are much more similar in use to child care type facilities than to an academic institution, which I didn't mention. Academic institutions would be like universities, colleges, high schools, things of that nature. So, but they were supportive of it, and they unanimously approved it 6-0.
Thank you, Doug.
Counselor Bean?
So the zoning didn't allow nursery schools, and what does that zoning, I don't have the, description of it, but why doesn't it allow it?
It didn't allow it because the staff, for as long as I can recall from my year here, and in my previous work in Auburn, it was the same thing, that staff would consider a nursery school, I think they focused on the word school, and would associate it with academic institutions. So there were a lot of areas that you wouldn't be allowed to have an academic institution like a large high school or school in a neighborhood setting. And again, the staff felt that it would be reasonable and appropriate to be able to have a nursery school on the appropriate size neighborhood type setting.
What about a small private school?
A small private school would be a private school. A nursery school is very different by its definition. It also is for children between, I think, a year and a half, up to 6 or something like that. It's a small range of young children for a nursery school. A private school, as far as I know, we would consider that to be an academic institution. That would remain. That's the only change, is moving nursery schools, which was not even on the list of uses. That's another reason why we wanted to add a definition, so it was clear that nursery schools is a defined use, and it would be associated more closely with child care facilities.
Well, as a former nursery school teacher, I'll have to beg to differ with you. I think nursery schools are academic. And I don't know how Mr. Pettingill feels, Council Pettingill feels, but I don't think they're the same as daycare. And a prime example is they're not there all day. They're there just specifically half a day, and the parents bring them there to learn. And gee, I hate to do that. I hate to have you put in a definition that nursery school is not a school. We have preschool now where in public schools all over, and those are kids younger than, they're pretty young, 4 years old, I think, for nursery school. I don't know, for preschool about. And they go to public school, and it's a school. And I wouldn't define that as, I don't know, I know the word nursery sounds like little babies, but I think it's older kids too.
Well, I think, as I understand it, and even by the state definition, let's see, it doesn't necessarily, okay, pardon me, here we go. It's for the care for 3 or more children between 33 months and 8 years of age. So there's flexibility as far as what that goes. We felt that it was accurate to use the state's definition, because this is licensed by the state as well, and thought it was important to match up the state's definition with adding it for ourselves. This doesn't take away the ability to have a preschool, or kindergarten's going to be either a private or public part of the school system, so I guess we felt it was a reasonable thing to allow nursery schools where at this point they're not allowed in a lot of zones because it's associated with academic institutions. And
I don't understand that. I mean,
let
why would you not want an academic institution?
Let me try to explain. I think it's a question of impact. In other words, that when planning looked at a nursery school, in comparison with a public elementary school, a middle school, or a high school, or a college, it has a much lower impact. And the question is, should it be allowed in more places than we allow these big, larger impact institutions? So I don't think this is necessarily saying they're not academic. It's just saying for zoning purposes, we're going to allow them in more places than we would a typical educational institution.
I know what you're saying. I just think rather than make the distinction, gee, they're not academic, they're more like daycare, I would make the distinction as long as they're a certain size. I would go by size, not that it's not an academic institution. But, it's, as long as they're allowed to have their nursery schools, that's okay. But I do believe the children do learn a lot, and there is a curriculum, and, so, thank you.
Great. Counselor Pettengill?
So I think the trouble with it comes down to the planning department took this to be able to allow more nursery schools to come in. And I think back when it probably came down to a commercial decision where people didn't want commercial entities in neighborhood areas. I actually applaud the planning department for most likely taking everything that came out of the licensing book from the state and able to set this definition, because a lot of it does determine on the length of the session and that 3.5 hours for why it's defined as a nursery school, as opposed to whether or not any academic learning is going on. And I do agree with you that the academic portion unfortunately does get overlooked because it's not in the free public school setting. But a lot of this will help everything we've been talking about with graduation rates and all that by getting more kids access to education early. So I think this is a good thing, and I think this will help eliminate a lot of confusion, both from parents, people that are trying to utilize the service, and anybody that may be trying to start the service, because there is a lot of red tape and nobody has answers for it. So I think this is a good step in the right direction.
Anything further from the council? To the public? Back to the council. I would just echo Councilor Pettingill's sentiments that the citizen who brought this initiative forward, I think that's great. And I know Dave and I have gone back and forth during every marijuana workshop about what is a nursery versus a nursery school, and so this will clarify that definition for when we get to that process as well. So I'm pretty glad. Councilor Layson.
Yeah, I noticed you talked about an acre. Is that the nominal 40,000 square feet type of rule, or is that 43,560 or whatever?
Well, an acre, 43,560 square feet.
Because I think you could go down to 40,000, which is the nominal acre lot too, so that may help. It's still large enough, I think, to facilitate it, but.
Right. Well, we didn't want to be arbitrary, but we wanted to at least put it in a size that could accommodate, and have room for the kids to play, have whatever necessary parking if that's going to be part of their program. And what we didn't want to do, we were really sensitive to neighborhoods and not allowing nursery schools in smaller and smaller lots, which really could be an impact, and we think that could be negative. And
it has to be accessory to a residential.
And it has to be accessory to a single-family dwelling. And, yeah, that's correct.
Councilor Marcotte.
Do you have any idea on an item count of how many parcels that this could fall under?
We did a count and came up with 157 total lots. I'll tell you, I didn't do a more thorough, in-depth looking at vacant lots and whether these are utilized 1-acre lots, but they're scattered out. I did provide, I have a map you could look at, but it's scattered about. And the other thing I would mention, the fact that, especially in the NCA district, this would be a conditional use request, so this is not a permitted use just on 1 acre. You would have to still go through a conditional use process, again, which involves notification of neighbors and meeting criteria that goes into impacts of surrounding property. So we want to make sure that there was some other input for applications.
Giving the neighbors an opportunity to come to a public hearing.
I'm sorry?
That would give the neighbors an opportunity to come to a public hearing. if they had
Correct,
some
yes.
issues.
Anything further from the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Well, to encourage the proliferation of nursery schools, but noting my objection to the definition, but nevertheless, I will vote yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
And Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, resolve replacing Master Policy Number 21, Employee Performance Evaluation Policy with a revised policy. Requested action to approve the resolve replacing Master Policy Number 21, Employee Performance Evaluations Policy with a revised policy.
So move.
Second?
I have a motion from Counselor LaJoy, a second from Counselor, who was it, Pettingill? Anything, did you want to give an overview of this?
Well, just very briefly, the
Great.
current policy was adopted in 1999. It's a little bit outdated, so we wanted to clean it up and bring it up to date. In particular, we wanted to clearly define evaluation cycles, outline the key elements that need to be included in the appraisal form, specify the roles and responsibilities of department heads and supervisors, and introduce the concept of using a corrective action work plan in those instances where an employee may have some issues that need to be addressed in terms of their performance.
Any questions from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 9.
Item number 9, resolve amending the traffic schedule to designate the west side of Main Street from Elm Street to Curtis Street, no parking anytime, subject to certain conditions. Requested action to approve the resolve amending the traffic schedule to designate the west side of Main Street from Elm Street to Curtis Street, no parking anytime, subject to certain conditions.
So move.
Second?
I have a motion from Counselor LaJoy, a second from Counselor Lyson, and City Administrator Barrett. Looks like he wants
Let
to
me
go.
start off by giving just a little bit of introduction. I know that you'll be hearing from a whole bunch of people probably tonight, but the council has held 2 workshops on this. Between the first workshop and the second workshop, there were a number of adjustments made in the plan. The first suggestion was to eliminate parking on both sides of Main Street in this general area to allow for the addition of a center turn lane. The revised plan basically eliminates parking on the west side of Main Street and offsets the center turn lane to allow parking to remain on the east side. At the last meeting, there was discussion of a number of issues, and so as you'll note in this order tonight that you're looking at, there are some specific conditions that are listed. Should the council vote to approve the change, the applicant would have to also meet the following conditions. Number 1, they would have to receive site plan approval by the planning board for the proposed development at 420 Main Street. That requires, as you know, a public hearing, notification to the neighbors. In this instance, it will most likely require a full traffic analysis and study. The creation of a minimum of 1 handicap parking space on the Shapiro property at 410 Main Street at the corner of Main and Elm. If this addition can meet the requirements of the city's land development code, that's in terms of setback requirements. Third, approval for the installation of the 3-lane section on Main Street between Elm and Curtis, including a center 2-way turn lane, and required adjustments to the 3-lane section between Holland and Elm through the Maine Department of Transportation traffic movement process under the delegated authority of the City of Lewiston. So again, that is something that would be looked at by the planning board. Widening Whipple Street adjacent to the development site to better accommodate parking on the north side of the street. Cost of such work to be borne by the developer, including all costs associated with widening the existing city right-of-way. And installation by the developer of the necessary street markings to establish the proposed 3-lane section between Elm and Curtis, along with no parking signs on the west side of this section of Main Street at locations approved by the Director of Public Works or his designee. So those were the conditions I think we pretty much discussed at the last meeting, and they are included in the order should the council proceed and adopt it.
Thank you. Any questions from the council to start? All right, we're gonna go to the public. I just will remind you, your 3-minute timer will be up in the corner up here, and if you could use the podium up over there, state your name and address. Thanks.
My name is Mike Gatto. I'm here tonight to represent Dunkin' Donuts on this process. Norm Lay is also here. We made a presentation at length at the workshop, so I won't do it tonight. We'll just be available to answer any questions that the council has. Thank you very much. We read the resolve, and we're happy with the conditions. Thank you.
I'm Kathleen Keenitz. This is 11th hour. I'm learning the ropes a little bit of these proceedings. I prepared a petition, a proposal that I'd like the City Council to review and submit to the Planning Board to review the zoning for the area in question. I've laid it out. I did this very quickly. I just acquired in the past couple of hours, I think 13 signatures from Lewiston residents as required. I could probably get another 20 more in another couple hours if I had the time, but I didn't. And I would really ask that this whole thing be tabled until it can be appropriately reviewed. I was here for the past 2 meetings. You know, a couple of the issues I raised was the appropriateness of the proposed business, which understandably the zoning allows it right now, but it's on the periphery of residential and office residential. And so looking at this more thoroughly and thinking it through, I think we really need to look at it in terms of zoning and whether the zoning in question should be changed. And so please consider this before voting on this. I would ask that you table the vote for tonight and allow the Planning Board to review the proposal. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Swanson from Pettingill Street in Lewiston. My great concern is pedestrian safety. There is not enough safe crosswalks on Main Street as it is. To move more congestion, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, into a more residential area, I think is going to cause an unsafe place for the families that live there. I live on Pettingill Street. I will not take a left-hand turn onto Main Street in my car because I don't feel safe. I almost got hit broadside from a car running a red light. And I understand, I'm not really opposed, I guess if somebody wants to do a business there, what I'm opposed of is the safety of the people. And by eliminating parking, there's already not enough parking there. There's not enough parking for the businesses that are there. I go to the Baptist church there on Sunday. There's not enough parking. And even if there is, it's not safe to cross the street. I don't know why in a city with this much population that there aren't more safe crosswalks with a light, not a little blinky guy thing with a man where that poor boy got killed. And this is within that vicinity. And it's pretty bad when you don't even want to make a left-hand turn onto Main Street when you're in a car. And That's all I have to say for right now, but I agree with this lady. I think it should be tabled. I think more discussion, more research to come out with a more favorable outcome for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Cole, and I'm a former resident of the Shapiro Apartments, and I lived there for approximately 3 years. My designated spot was on Whipple Street, and I can't see that this study that they did on Whipple Street is so dangerous that there needs to be put a light in there. And as a pedestrian, I have learned that I have no right as a pedestrian if I am not at a crosswalk. There's no way that you can cross the street. You could be standing with a crock pot full of food in your hand, pouring rain, and there is no mercy from the traffic. And in this particular instance, putting a high-volume Dunkin' Donuts into a residential area is really going to cause far more problems for pedestrians that already exist. And I also back up what Kathleen Keenan says. I really believe that there's a zoning problem here, that you would allow such a business to be put into a residential area. So I'm just asking that Kathleen has the right idea of let's table this for now and do some more research into this before we make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further? Thanks.
Hey, my name's Josh Renee Jean. I live at 108 Spring Street in Lewiston. I just wanted to say that I also agree with Kathy Keenan that we should be looking at the zoning in that particular area. It's an absolute fact that no matter what happens, when the business goes in there, that traffic's going to be increasing on Whipple, Spring, Riverside, Holland, and Bridge, without a question. We're talking about exponential amounts of traffic coming through that neighborhood, and without considering how that's going to affect the people who already live there, how the pedestrians can move about it, as well as now the problems that we're going to be facing. Anybody who lives in those neighborhoods would tell you that there's different streets that they take at different times of day in order to access Main Street, and that's based on traffic pressure from CMMC, as well as the businesses, as well as the traffic that comes up and down Main Street. So another consideration as well is that on Whipple Street, when the train comes through, there's no option. You'll then have that traffic coming back out on Main Street, which is another consideration. So we have 2 overpasses, one on Bridge and one on Riverside. So we have options for the people that live behind the railroad tracks, but if you're in front of it, when the train's coming through, you don't have an option. So those are just things that I want to share with you all, and I think that when you look at urban enterprise zoning or urban zoning in a primarily residential neighborhood, when you're talking about not doubling, it's probably 20 times the traffic that's coming through that neighborhood right now. It's going to affect the people that live there already. So it's not just a question of fixing the Main Street extension, but fixing all of the side streets as well, because that's where the traffic's going to be coming into and out of. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have further public comment on this issue?
Hi, my name is Jody Wolverton, and I live at 23 Pondridge Drive in Lewiston. I'm here to speak tonight on behalf of the Main Street Duncan project. I haven't actually met Mr. Boulay before, but I became aware of this project today and wanted to come and speak on his behalf more as a member of the community and to just give you an idea of the support, what a good community member Dunkin' Donuts and the franchisees are. Over the years, I've been involved with a number of nonprofits. I was the president of the local schools PTO. managed the snack shack at the Elliott baseball fields, worked on a committee for the St. Dom's boys hockey program fundraisers, and served as a board member on the Maine Gladiators, which is the youth hockey organization in town. All of these nonprofits over the years have asked for the Dunkin' franchisees for sponsorships in a variety of ways, ranging from team sponsorships to pay for baseball jerseys, giving donuts on Saturday mornings to the snack shack so that we could sell them, providing coffee to the teachers at the school for Teacher Appreciation Week, provided breakfast at the golf tournament for the golf participants at no cost. And the other thing is the very popular Dunkin' Community Mug program that many of you might be familiar with. If you have bought one of these over the years, you know the value of them. And these cards, for those not familiar, they're granted to various nonprofits in towns, and the nonprofits can sell them for 100% profit. And the local Dunkin' franchisees must accept these cards, and it's a big sacrifice for them because it's basically a free coffee for everybody that has the card on Sundays. So I just mention all these things because, sometimes these things get lost in the shuffle, and they don't get credit for everything that they do in the community. Another thing, Dunkin' has allowed many baseball teams, cheering teams to tag outside their businesses. And I mention that because a lot of the national companies, Starbucks, Lowe's, Walmart has started to allow it, but they never used to. A lot of these national companies don't allow things like that. And Dunkin', even though they're a national company, these are local franchisees owners. These are good community members. They support the communities that they do business in. And these things are really important to the functioning of a good community. So anyway, I just wanted to, Dunkin' doesn't usually go around tooting their own horn about all the things they do in the community, and I wanted to just make sure that this gets some light. And I think, as much as possible, if we can support them as they've supported the community with a reasonable request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I live on Main Street in Lewiston. So I agree with everyone that came before me on this issue, and I want to talk about what this wonderful lady before me talked about. We do love Dunkin'. It's not that we don't love Dunkin', all the things that they do for us. I go to Dunkin' every day. I live on Dunkin' Donuts. But we are worried about our safety. Our safety comes first. Our resident comes first. So it's a legitimate concern that we have. So City Council and should see that and should address that. So I should follow. You should what Kathy, I think it's Kathy, said about tabling it and talking to the planning board and getting more information about the rezoning and all the things that needs to be addressed should happen. So I live on Main Street and I try to walk and it's just impossible. I have a lot of friends and family who live on that area too. It's just incredibly impossible to do that. And with more traffic coming in, someone is gonna die. And I don't want another Lewiston resident dying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lucian Clavette. I own Creative Glass, and I'm right in the same neighborhood. The crosswalk that everybody's talking about that the younger gentleman passed away on has been upgraded from the city, and that's wonderful. If everybody's concerned about crossing, maybe we should focus on another crosswalk like that when this facility goes in. I don't know if that's been in the plans or not. I've missed out on a few of these planning meetings. But I think we're either going to let somebody local take that lot, take that property, or we're going to let somebody from out of town come in and try and build something bigger, which will draw in more. But I don't get why we're talking about all this added traffic or all this added insecurity. Everybody that goes to Dunkin' now goes just down the road. They're going to go a little closer to where the new location is. It's going to be just down the road from the hospital. So the congestion from the hospital area is going to move up the road a little more. I don't think it's more traffic. I think it's the same traffic, because the same people go to that same Dunkin' Donuts on Main Street. So I don't know that the outer staters are going to add more traffic to that local area once this new facility's built. I mean, Strawberry Avenue took a lot of traffic off Main Street when they built the Strawberry Avenue location. That reduced a lot of congestion. So moving it up the road, I don't see where it's going to add a lot more. So I think we ought to let the local people build, you know, into the properties that are vacant and need to be built on. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a gentleman up front here.
Yeah, Mike Shapiro. I'm just thinking about growth. Growth is wonderful, and growth can be horrible. I don't really envy your position here tonight, having to make a decision on this. I do want to state, though, that Mr. Boulay from Dunkin' Donuts has worked with us diligently to try to get some kind of an agreement so that it's livable for both of us. And I think we have, like this afternoon, achieved that goal. I also know that the council is going to be involved in the 2 parking spaces that we're going to need in the front lawn for the hearing aid center, and hope that we can come to that agreement also. I think Dunkin' Donuts, watching them work with us, is going to be a good neighbor. But you still have to make your decision. So that's where I stand right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment? Unfortunately, comment is reserved to once per agenda item.
Can I sit here?
Sure.
Wow. All right. So my name is Martina Harrison, and I am the general manager of Norman's 4 locations of Dunkin' Donuts. And I just want to speak on what Lucian was saying about safety and about the difference in moving our location. And it is a relocation. I think a lot of people were concerned about that it was an addition, but it's a relocation. When it comes to safety, one of the reasons that we want to move is we're trying to improve the safety of our guests and of our employees. We ended up about a year ago closing our 3rd shift because it had become increasingly unsafe for not only the guests, but for the employees, for the people visiting from across the street. So we made a decision. We took a loss of almost $100,000 in a year's time to make it a safer place to be. So when we're talking about moving it up the street and impacting safety, the goal was partially motivated by increasing safety. And I was going to speak about that crosswalk that was recently put in. If crossing the street seems to be a concern, that crosswalk is there. I think Lucian's correct when he says that putting another one in might help. When it comes to the traffic pattern there currently, and it being considered a high crash area as is, I personally was in an accident in that very area back in 2016. So I think some of the plans that they had suggested as an alternative to the way it currently is would help improve that as well. So I just think it's very important to understand that a lot of this move isn't just solely based off of, from a business point of view. It is a lot about the community. It is a lot about safety. It is a lot about improving the area that it's in and improving the guest experience. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
So hi, my name is Noam Boulay. I'm the developer. I feel there's a lot of misconceptions about our plan. We've worked diligently to try to address the neighbors' concerns. We've had quite a few neighbors that have said no from the beginning, unwilling to negotiate with us whatsoever. So that's why we worked out well with Mr. Shapiro. It's not been an easy negotiation, but we did work out an agreement. As far as the safety goes, we're trying to improve the safety. I didn't create the issues at Whipple Street. The issues are there now. So we're trying to improve it. We're trying to improve the issues that we have on Lower Main Street with the traffic. We've done everything we can to try to accommodate people in the area, but when you have people that just do not want to hear anything you have to say, it's no, it's dead on arrival. So we've worked with the city staff to try to come up with this plan. We've had numerous meetings, including the planning board, which they went out to public notice that we were going to the planning board, and nobody showed up except us. And the planning board agreed with us 100% on the plan. So I know we have to go back and hash out more, but as far as tabling it, we've already been there. And this has been going on for over a year. I'm not sure what else we can do to alleviate anybody else's concerns in that area, but sitting down with the planning board, we will be talking with them when we will be going through that process, so I don't see any reason on tabling the items. People had an opportunity to go to the planning board, and they didn't take it. So I'd just like to say that I'm trying to do everything we can to work with the community and improve this for everybody. We impact Main Street quite heavily where we are. We're trying to fix that problem. If there was any other area on Main Street we could go to, we would have looked at it, but this has been going on for, since 1970. We were there since 1962, so it's been a constant issue. And this is the only opportunity we've seen in all these years. So I'd like you guys to consider taking the vote tonight instead of tabling it. And if people want to show up at the planning board meetings when we're there, feel free to show up then. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this agenda item? Oh, yep.
David Perot, 103 Heather Drive, and I'm not a public speaker, so I'll make this real short. We've been going Dunkin' Donuts. I've been going there since 1982, 3, when I got out of service, and I've seen everything that's going on there. The drugs and drunks and the homeless sleeping in there, and it's turned to a big. Excuse me. They lock the door now because people go in there and they take their drugs, and sometimes they knock because customer knocks, go into the bathroom and nobody's answering. So finally, one of the employees knocks and nobody answers. They open it. Somebody OD'd, or they got to bring them to the hospital because of the drugs. And one more thing is, if Dunkin' Donuts don't move to the other part, somebody else will, and it might be a bigger company. It might be who knows, and it might be even worse. So that's all I gotta say. That's just my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Grant Kelly. I'm at 437 Main Street. And to back up Kathy, I'd appreciate if you review what she's put together. This is more of a parking issue than anything. We already have not nearly enough parking on Main Street for all the businesses that are there. And to remove these parking spots will be devastating to our business there at the church, and also especially to Kathy's business and others. So by removing the spaces, it will cause a great impact on the whole rest of the community that's already there.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Hello, I'm Kendra Boulay. I'm not from Lewiston, I'm from Turner, but I still want to speak. Essentially, the biggest issue is safety, and to come back to that is the main focus that we also have, as well as others in the community. And the location where we're at right now is also half of the battle. The safety of our employees is our number one concern. The safety of customers pulling in is our second concern as well. I don't believe that that property is made to even have a business. You can't even properly pull into the driveway. I don't know if anybody has attempted to come through the drive-through, but essentially the drive-through goes into Main Street every single morning, every single day. And essentially that's more dangerous for the public than moving the Dunkin' Donuts down and adding that middle lane. There is no middle lane when you're coming up from the lower Main Street. So essentially, when the brand comes, they also see it as a huge safety and traffic concern, and they can't even do any sort of things that the brand needs to do because their main concern is the safety of also the people walking in our parking lot. You can't really walk at all. It's just very, very dangerous. So there is a huge part that we are trying to eliminate here, and it's creating a safer environment for people to come to our local business, as well as making the citizens happy, which we have. So to table it and revisit and go over a plan that was put together 3 hours ago when we have years of planning that we've done, just seems really, seems to be blunt, ridiculous. We spent so much time and energy and trying to make everybody happy, and I think we really did do that with the citizens and with the other boards. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Unfortunately, public comment time is not time for questions. Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Lots of takers, okay.
Good evening. My name is Jean Dupree. I've been paying the taxes on that land for well over 20 years, and it's time for something to happen there. You people that have invested less than 20 years in the area, you should have bought my parking. It's been for sale. It's been there. Step up and buy some land, pay some taxes, and get some parking. I think this organization is looking for the better of it for everybody, and it's a blessing. Let me see. I'm not a very good public speaker, but I'm an immigrant. I was born in Quebec. My parents moved here in the late 50s and to establish a business, and then they went back to Quebec to sell a farm, and that's when I was born. And then they came back, and that's my story, I guess. But we're hardworking people. I've been up and down the ladder most of the day today. That's what I do for work. I build and I develop. I tear down stuff when it's dilapidated and it's got over 400 code violations. I walked into see Gary Campbell and what's going on. Da, 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 da. He told me all the problems. Well, let's make it a better thing. Let's clean it up. I saved my nickels. I bought a piece of land. I says, well, people are all worried about what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean it up first. And then I cleaned it up. And I worked hard. So it's just a simple investment. And this could be a better thing, and it might be a blessing in disguise. If it doesn't happen, well, we'll see what happens. But just saying what I got to say. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, I will close that hearing and bring it back to the council. Councilor for Ward 1.
Yes, someone mentioned earlier they didn't envy it making a decision on this project. And again, as I understand it, Ed, and correct me if I'm wrong, our resolve, has a lot of conditions on it, but really the only thing we're doing is really changing the traffic schedule, right, to eliminate parking on one side of the road. Now, that's being done in order to accommodate some changes in Main Street. And again, people know me that safety is of utmost importance to me. And one of the ways this is being framed is safety against parking, or safety against, whose safety is it? Is it the employees? Is it the change in the location, improving safety? I think the problem that I see, and I want to read one of the conditions, and it's on our information thing, and it's also in the council resolve. Please note that should this resolve be approved, and again, what we're doing is approving the resolve tonight, the project will still require site plan approval by the planning board and the development and presentation of a full traffic study on the impacts of this project. And I think part of what we're doing is accommodating potential design changes to allow safer traffic movements in this portion of Main Street. Now, granted, people struggle with crossing Main Street, and I know that's an issue. I know we have a crossing at the hospital, and we have a crossing at Fry Street. I'm not so sure that because traffic needs to continue to be moved, that there'll be another location between those two places. And Mike, if you, when you speak, if you could explain that situation a little bit. You're not looking to do a crossing, I'll just ask that, right? I mean, I don't think MDOT would allow it on that road. I don't think the city would necessarily allow it either. But it's, the crossing is obviously difficult, and you're not going to get a crossing everywhere you want, so I'll take a look at it. The other thing about the zoning petition, and again, a lot of people who spoke had terrific points of view. I mean, there's points on both sides. And I'm not trying to belittle those at all, either for or against. But I have a question for code. The zoning petition, I mean, there's an application that's proceeding through a process, both the planning board and now the council, and potentially going back to the planning board. Mike, being a former planning director here in Lewiston, is this project not grandfathered regardless of a zone change? I mean, I don't think we could with this process at this point, go back and change the zone anyway, could we?
They haven't submitted anything for development review approval at this point. So I suppose if you folks decided to table the matter, and a petition was submitted and it went through the process, the planning board, the city council, like the amendment you heard before this evening for nursery schools, yeah, potentially the zoning could change there to not allow restaurants, to not allow Dunkin' Donuts there. So is it too late? It's only too late if you guys decide not to act upon this evening, and a petition is acted upon and you folks consider that. Otherwise, the project will move forward, the zoning is in place, it's an allowed use.
Because I think to a certain extent, I mean, in my opinion, this project's been over a year in the making. I mean, it's been clear. There have been many meetings with the public, many meetings before boards and the council, a couple workshops. So I just don't know. I mean, they, in good faith, put forward an effort. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that if we pass this resolve, that this project will go in. I want to look at a traffic study that encourages a design that's most safety conscious. And again, pitting parking against, safety, parking's going to lose in my all the time. And to me, I think the traffic study is critically important. And if we don't pass the resolve, this project's not going anywhere. Therefore, we'll never see a traffic study to say what is the safest way to get cars and pedestrians through this portion of Main Street.
And just to be clear, when you say we, when the project happens, if the resolve is passed, you folks won't necessarily be involved going forward. It would all be handled at the planning board at that point. So they'll be the board that looks at the traffic movement permit and making the final decision with respect to development of the site.
And again, there's a certain parking requirement for the new use that they're going to have to show that they're doing. Traffic movement, the two-way left-hand turn will facilitate that left-hand turn in from both directions, I assume. And again, I don't think, I think if we say no here, we're not really looking at that portion of Main Street as well as we can. And the resolve also says that if there's improvements going to be done, they're at the cost of the developer too, right? Pretty much. So, you know, like I said, it's a hard decision one way or the other. This is in my ward. Many of you are my constituents, and I know you. Also, I think I'd like to hear someone speak a little bit about why the old Dunkin' is not up to snuff, because people were saying, why not keep that one? Well, if you can't make a business go because you can't keep up with the brand, that's an issue. So if someone from the team could talk about that as well, why that location's inadequate. And again, this is a difficult decision, but I trust the planning board's going to make the right call if in fact it goes that far.
So based on Councilor Lyson's comments, would anyone from the organization like to comment specifically on that item?
So basically, the drive-through system, we don't have enough stacking. What we're looking at, the new system is to have an express window and dual drive-throughs right now is the current design, whichever is going to facilitate faster service. The location we have now, we can't put in the express windows, we can't get around the building. We've stretched the property to the limit, we're out to the property lines. We're still backing out on Main Street. We've done everything we can over the years. The new footprint for Dunkin' will be very difficult to even fit into that location for the size of the building and everything else. So all the improvements they're doing to the sandwich system and different beverage systems we have. So we've basically outgrown it. We've outgrown it quite a while ago, but we didn't have any opportunities really to move the location. This property has been available. We were looking at it for a while now, and now I have the opportunity to do something about it. Okay.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Lyson?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Pattengill.
Just to piggyback off Councilor Lyson's comments, this project here is about changing the traffic study. It's not about whether or not we support development on a parcel of land, whether or not we support, a particular business over another. But to Councilor Lyson's point, without this moving forward and allowing the developer to do their due diligence in the impetus of improving safety, pedestrian safety, it's already been identified that this is a dangerous and deadly area of Main Street. It's a bad design. That road is too wide, which causes traffic to move too fast through that area. We already have issues of distracted driving, which causes a lot of issues in town. Without allowing this to move forward, as it already being identified as a dangerous and deadly area of the road, there's going to be no cause for any traffic study or a traffic movement study to take a look and try to address these areas and improve safety. So by allowing this to move forward, we will be addressing the issues of pedestrian safety and vehicular safety and the safety of the city, the people in our town. So I would like everybody to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Councilor Beam.
So my understanding, according to Mr. Barrett, is if we approve this resolve, then it goes into the hands of the planning board, and the planning board is to fulfill all the requirements that we have on this resolve. And once those have been fulfilled, the work is done, the project goes through, if the planning board decides.
That's correct. If they apply for a site plan and the planning board approves the site plan and the conditions on this resolve are met, It will not come back to the council. It's in the planning board's purview.
Yeah, it's hard to make a decision when we really are working in a void, almost, because we really aren't seeing and hearing the plans completely. I know we've had workshops on it, and we're getting there, and we've done a lot of work on it, but it's hard to do that. But as Councilor Lyson said, I trust the planning board will do due diligence and fulfill these requirements, and hopefully, even if the project does go through and so it's not perfect, then perhaps we can tweak it even then. And I was going to say, gee, I'd like a donut right now. And Dunkin' Donuts could be a nice neighbor. But I know that people do like to go and have coffee and donuts and socialize sometimes, and it might be a nice thing for the neighborhood too. As far as the zoning, it's zoned properly. We don't have to change the zoning, and that's a big factor as far as I'm concerned. So I think it's not going to impact the historical neighborhood, because that neighborhood is zoned historical. And I did drive around today a couple of times to just check it out. And it's in a position where I don't think it'll have a big impact. It's going to have some impact, but it's not going to keep creeping. It's not going to be like a creeping thing where all kinds of convenience stores and things like that get built there. The zoning is right there, and it's going to stop. I'm just saying what my thinking is, and so I feel as though if it's zoned properly, and if we really, really work hard to make it a safety thing for everyone, and let me caution you, if you have similar problems to unpleasant guests, please call the police department. That sounds like a police problem. I mean, because they could easily move to your new place too, and there's no need for that. We have a really good police department that, will take care of that. So, I think I've said what I was going to say.
Anyone else from the council? All right, I will take my moment then. So I appreciate all of the folks who have come out repeatedly for workshops and now this vote. I also really appreciate the citizens' initiative in working to come with a proposal. As I said earlier, that's a tough thing to do, so I can understand how frustrating and bureaucratic this process can be. So I just wanted to thank everyone for being here, and then also just clarify with the city administrator. So Councilor Lyson was talking about the traffic study, and is that part of the provision with item number 3 under the resolve? The Department of Transportation Traffic Movement permit process?
David can help me. It's actually part of the site plan review process.
Okay. So that is built into that, even though it's not explicitly
Yeah,
listed
because the
under
traffic
conditions.
movement permit will be required for the project.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. Anything further on the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, order approving the assignment of a purchase and sale agreement for 188 Lincoln Street between the city and LWS Development LLC and Wilbur and Company to 188 Lincoln Street LLC, and to authorize the city
Hold on one
administrator.
second. Folks, if you're exiting, could you please take your conversations outside? Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Sorry about that.
Sure, that's okay. I'll start again.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 10, order approving the assignment of a purchase and sale agreement for 188 Lincoln Street between the city and LWS Development LLC and Wilbur and Company to 188 Lincoln Street LLC, and to authorize the city administrator to execute the same. Requested action to approve the order approving the assignment of a purchase and sale agreement for 188 Lincoln Street between the city and LWS Development LLC and Wilbur and Company to 188 Lincoln Street LLC, and to authorize the city administrator to execute the same.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, a second by Counselor Pettingill. Comments from the council? I see Link is at the ready to give us a preview.
And quick, I mean, that really covers it. The only thing I would add, it was on, it's on the actual council resolve, but it's not on the cover sheet, is that it's also authorizing the city administrator to execute whatever their other documents are associated with the closing. If you looked at the purchase and sale agreement, we're agreeing to lease parking to them for, I think it's 5 spaces for $20 a month for the first 5 years, then it goes to market rate. So there's a handful of other items we're working through getting this to closing. It's simply authorizing city administrator to both execute the assignment of the purchase and sale agreement and whatever else we have to do to get to closing.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the council while Link's up? To the public? Back to the council. Counselor Marcotte.
And like I have the last 6 times, and probably a 7th time when it was before the planning board, I don't think that this is the highest and best use for the property, and therefore I'm opposed to it.
Any other comments from councilors? We will call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
No.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 5 to 1.
Agenda item number 11.
Item number 11, order authorizing the city administrator to execute and record a declaration of environmental covenant on the former site of the Androscoggin Mill number 8. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the city administrator to execute and record a declaration of environmental covenant on the former site of the Androscoggin Mill number 8.
So moved.
Go ahead. Second.
Okay, great. I have a motion by Counselor Pettingill, a second by Counselor LaJoy after fighting over it. Questions from the, could you give us a brief overview, Link? Thanks.
Yes. About 10 years ago, the city received a brownfield cleanup grant to tear down the former boiler plant and smokestack on the backside of the Androscoggin Mill. As the Maine DEP was going over an audit of their documents, they realized that there was supposed to be a covenant noting all of the restrictions on the property that should have been recorded. It did not get recorded, so the city attorney has worked with Maine DEP to get it in the form they like. It's basically a reiteration of the issues addressed in the voluntary response action plan letter. It's just a statement that will get recorded.
And on the resolve, under the 5th whereas, it changes the language to declaration of environmental covenants, plural. Is that a typo, or is that correct?
I'm sorry, it went plural?
The 5th whereas.
There's only one covenant, so.
That's what I thought.
Yes, so
If
it
we
was a
could just-
typo on my part. If, with my glasses, I'm not finding it, but it was not, it is not plural.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Link? To the public? Great. Back to the council. Counselor Marcotte.
I'm just curious, not long ago, there was some environmental cleanup along Gully Brook. Is that a separate parcel, or is that all the same parcel?
Actually, this is the same parcel. I believe you came to some of those environmental hearings on that, exactly. This is on the back side, and it's sort of an L-shaped parcel. So the smokestack was right up against the railroad tracks, and there's a little parcel behind the Monte Hydro, not the Monte, the Upper A hydro station next to Gully Brook.
Because I remember the remediation along Gully Brook. For some reason, I don't remember the boiler building.
Well, and that's, it was a historic property, so it took quite a bit to get through it, but most people don't. I mean, literally, there was a tree growing through it. You'd stand and look through the window and look at blue sky through the roof.
And that predated the Avon building coming down?
Yes,
I think it did, yeah.
Okay, that's probably why I don't remember it, because it's tucked in behind that.
Yeah,
building.
I mean, it's literally on the very back side of the, right by the mill, and it was behind a fence. So unless you knew it was there, nobody was just gonna stumble upon it.
Any further questions from the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 12.
Item number 12, resolve authorizing transfer of $210,000 from fiscal year 18 capital project fund to fund 3 fiscal year 20 LCIP projects. Requested action to approve the resolve authorizing transfer of $210,000 from fiscal year 18 capital project fund to fund the 3 fiscal year 20 LCIP projects.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Marcotte, a second from Counselor LaJoy. Heather, would you like to provide a?
Sure. As part of the budgetary process and the capital improvement program, when we were deliberating, or when the council was deliberating various funding options for LCIP projects, it was identified that these 3 projects met the need to still be used for bond proceeds to be used to fund these, and we did have surplus funds available from the FY18 capital projects based upon bond premium, accumulated interest, net of issuance costs. So that was the funding source that was identified when we presented the various options to the council, and this just authorizes and appropriates that money.
Any questions for Heather? Counselor Marcotte?
Maybe for planning left. I was just curious, what kind of projects for the canal improvements?
We have a draft plan, which I did not bring with me tonight, that we are planning to bring to the council to go over. It's primarily going to be the area along Smart Payne Park, from the new bridge back toward the Red Shop area, cleaning up that area, redoing the fencing, doing some, obviously clearing all of the grub, all the stuff that's down there needs to be cleared out, doing some plantings. You remember other things?
Addressing access issues, after. There'll be, part of the project is, right now with the current fencing, it's very difficult to access the actual canal from a maintenance standpoint. So they'll be addressing that as part of the plans as well, to be able to get back in there in future to continue to maintain.
And I think it's also, as you had asked about some of the pedestrian bridges that go across the lower canal, I think they're going to start the process of at least evaluating them to see if the understructures of those are salvageable or not. But we'll be coming forward with a full proposal for the council to take a look at.
So for right now, it's just from the new traffic bridge back to the L next to Atlas Supply?
I think so.
That's a very short segment. And the canal continues on after the traffic bridge, takes a 90-degree angle to the river, but has another stretch that continues in front of Continental Mill.
Correct.
I would hope that we could clean up some brush in there as well. That's where the other older bridges.
Yes, that's where the 2 older bridges are. I suspect some of it's going to depend on what kind of pricing we get when we go out to bid.
Remind me, I get something with me tonight I need to talk to you about pricing.
Okay.
Sounds correct. Any other folks from the council have questions? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 13.
Item number 13, reports and updates.
Yeah, that's me. So the school committee will meet next Monday. Today was Superintendent Bill Webster's last day as superintendent and superintendent to be. He is now. Todd Finn will be starting soon. You all may remember him from speaking on the LHS expansion recently. If you haven't met him and would like to, definitely reach out. He's very amenable and wants to work closely with the city. We don't have an agenda for that meeting yet, so I think that's it. Anyone else have a report or update?
Probably the next agenda item.
Okay. Agenda item number 14.
Item number 14, any other city business counselors or others may have relating to Lewiston City Government.
Counselor Marcotte.
Yes, news blast went out today on the city webpage that I'd like to highlight. Aquatic facility hours and program information, since that was something I took an interest in when we were discussing it, particularly last year, I believe. Kennedy Park Aquatic Facility, 2019 operating hours, Monday through Friday from 12:30 to 5:30 p.m., June 24th to August 16th. Saturdays in July, 13th, 20th, and 27th, and August 3rd from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I hope everyone enjoys the free pool. Come down and cool off.
Let's hope.
If the temperature
That's
ever
what I was gonna-
rises.
Yes. And Mayor Cloutier asked us to remind everyone that LA World Refugee Day this year is being held Thursday, June 20th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. at Samard Payne Memorial Park. And the public is certainly invited to come out and enjoy the evening.
I will say there was one other additional posting on the Lewiston City website, similar to what Councilor Marcotte just read about fireworks and the dates for that. I would encourage folks to take a look at those. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but definitely have heard some while trying to sleep recently. And I know neighborhood dogs, cats, and counselors appreciate when we follow the rules. Stand within the rules, yes. Anything further? Counselor from Ward 1, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do. To enter into an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056A, to discuss a personnel matter.
Do I have a second? All in favor? All right. Good job.